Today we're going to be sizing up 3 rings and soldering them together. The first step on our time-consuming journey is going to be cutting the rings open. After the ring's cut open, we're going to pull it open on our mandrel, create a little space where we're going to add the extra gold. The next step is you want to smooth the edges of your cut with the sanding disc. Make it nice and smooth for that new piece of gold. Next, we're going to cut out the appropriate length of sizing stock to add to the band. Once you're done with all that, you can fiddle around with adding the new piece of gold into the band. Make sure you get it nice and straight. Once your piece is situated in there, you're almost ready to solder. You're going to give your piece a bath in a mixture of denatured alcohol and boric acid powder, and that will protect the ring against fire scale from the torch. It's surprisingly difficult to get a clear shot of jewelry with a video camera, but our next step is going to be adding flux to the piece. Wherever we add this, that's where the solder is going to flow most easily. So we're going to ball our solder up, drop it on the piece, and pull it down from underneath. You're less likely to get pitting in your rings when you pull it down from underneath as opposed to heating over the top. After your ring's cooled off, you can start clearing away the excess gold on the inside of the ring. I always start with the low grit cartridge roll, but you want to do this in short bursts so you don't clear away too much gold, because you got to keep in mind we're going to move to a higher grit a little later on. Next, I'm going to switch to a sanding disc and start clearing away some of the excess gold on the sides of the rings. I've seen a lot of jewelers use their sanding discs facing in, but for me, I prefer it facing out. I just feel like it allows me to see what I'm doing better and I can get a better surface on my ring. But however it feels right to you, that's going to be the way to go. There's no right or wrong way here. Back when I started doing jewelry, I was taught to do all this cleanup with hand files. Half round files on the inside and flat files on the sides and top. Now, I still use a file on the top to get a really nice smooth surface, but once I discovered sanding discs and cartridge mandrel rolls, I was done using hand files for the majority of my cleanup. It saves me so much time doing it this way. I usually stick to the coarse grit sanding discs, and I go through about 20 to 30 a day, just depending on what my day is like. As you're cutting away gold, you want to constantly be stopping and checking and making sure that you're not cutting away too much. Next, we're going to hit the inside with our high grit cartridge roll, giving it a nice smooth surface inside. Once we've got the insides all smooth, we're going to put them on our mandrel and make sure we actually got the ring to the right size. A rawhide mallet is used to round out the rings, keeping the gold from getting dented up. Next, we're going to file away the excess gold across the top of the ring. You can do this after the set is soldered together, but I prefer to do it before. Just saves me a little time later on. Also, do yourself a favor and only file in one direction. None of that back and forth business. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a laser welder in my shop, which means I can hold the rings in my hand, line them up perfectly, and then tack them together. Those of you that don't have this option, however, will have to use some of those tweezers that you put your sets on to solder together. Luckily, I haven't had to deal with those things in a few years. After our set is tacked together and given its fire bath of doom, it's ready to flow some more solder on it. When I sized the rings up earlier, I used hard solder that has a higher melting point. So, since I'm having to heat the ring again, I'm using a soft solder which has a lower melting point. That way, the solder I did previously won't pop. After we've let the white gold cool off, we're going to throw it in our pickling acid. That I left on over the weekend so it looks gnarly. Now what that does is just gets off the excess flux and any of the fire scale that was on the ring, and then we get back to cleaning it up again. We're basically going to redo all the steps we did earlier just to make sure we get a perfect finish on the inside and outside of the ring. Throw it back on the mandrel, make sure it's the right size when it's all soldered together, round it out, and smooth it out again to get all the little marks from the mandrel out of the inside. We're going to file down the excess gold on the outside of the ring and get a nice flush look. Then we're going to take the file and we're going to cut the grooves back across the ring so it looks like 3 rings together. After I'm done cutting grooves back into the rings, I'm going to take a triangle needle file and run it down those grooves just to soften up the edges a little bit. I honestly have no idea why it was taking me this long to file those edges smooth in this video, but here we are. 2 hours later. Woo, I thought that would never end. Once I'm done with the file, I'm going to switch to a low grit emery stick, and then I'm going to hit the outsides and the sides of the rings to remove all the file marks. Once I'm done with the low grit emery stick, I'm going to switch to a high grit emery stick and do the exact same things to get a nice smooth, polish ready surface. And apparently I disappeared. Now once I'm done with all that fun stuff, I'm going to switch to my bristle brush that I have loaded up with Tripoli. That's a polishing compound that removes all the tiny little scratches from the ring, and it helps remove all the original rhodium from the rings, making it a little easier to do the final polish. If you have a ring that has a lot of detailed parts across the top, you want to be really careful when you're polishing this, because these compounds cut away the gold pretty quickly. My final step is using a knife edge red rubber wheel. I'm going to use this to go through the lines in the ring just to make sure they're nice and perfectly smooth on the inside and out. Our next step is the big polishing wheel. We're going to hit the inside of the ring first and get a nice high shine. Whatever you do to one side of the ring, you want to flip it over and do to the other. That way you know you've got an even polish on the inside. When you're polishing the outside of your rings, be wary of where your solder seams are. You do not want the wheel running parallel with your seams. Otherwise, it'll pull the solder out and it'll leave sizing seams in the side of your ring. Then everyone will know that you worked on it. Also, like I said before, if there's a lot of detail on your ring, do not hold those areas on the wheel very long. It will cut away the gold, it will ruin the design, and everyone will know that you screwed it up. So hit those areas lightly and be done with it. Once I'm done polishing the ring, I throw it in my ultrasonic cleaner and get all the polish compound out. After I'm done with that, I'm going to steam it off, get all the water spots off the ring, and prepare it for rhodium plating. Our first step in rhodium plating is putting the rings into the electro bath to clean it. Once the rings are done in the electro bath, I'm going to pull them out and rinse them in distilled water before applying the rhodium plating. I'm going to leave it in the rhodium bath for about 20 to 25 seconds. Most, if not all, white gold rings are rhodium plated because white gold without the plating still has a yellow cast to it. So the rhodium makes it really white like platinum. And here we have our finished rings all soldered together. Now, soldering together is beneficial because it keeps the gold from rubbing and wearing away. This makes your ring last a whole lot longer, so if you have a set that's not soldered, maybe get it done.